It's astonishing how versatile the human mind is, isn't it?
It really is.
One moment we're deciding on breakfast cereal, the next we're grappling with these monumental challenges like, curing cancer or exploring the cosmos.
Yeah, that adaptability.
Yeah,
It's defining.
this incredible adaptability, this breadth of capability, it truly sets us apart.
Yeah.
But despite our daily experience of this amazing mental flexibility, how do we even begin to understand something so vast and intricate?
That's the million-dollar question.
For decades, scientists have dreamed of a unified theory of cognition, a single overarching framework to explain how we learn, decide, interact. All of it.
Right, the grand unifying theory.
The challenge is most computational models developed so far have been incredibly specialized. Think of something like AlphaGo mastering Go.
Amazing at Go.
It's brilliant at that one thing, but tells us nothing about how we remember a grocery list or plan a holiday.
Exactly, domain specific. And that's precisely where today's deep dive takes us. We're going to explore a groundbreaking new development from a recent Nature article, a computational model called Centaur.
Centaur.
Yeah, it's positioned as a foundation model designed to predict and simulate human behavior across any experiment that can be described in natural language.
Any experiment. That sounds incredibly ambitious.
It is.
We've seen so many attempts at unified theories. What makes this particular approach, Centaur, fundamentally different or maybe more promising? What are the core ingredients?
Well, at its heart, Centaur is built on a cutting-edge large language model.
Okay, an LLM.
Right. And it's been fine-tuned on an absolutely massive curated data set of human behavioral data, which they call Psych 101.
Psych 101.
Those two components are really the bedrock here.
Okay, that's a lot to take in. A foundation model for any human experiment.
Wow. Where do we even begin to unpack how they built something like that?
Well, maybe start with the challenge they're tackling.
Right. For a long time, the holy grail in psychology has been this idea of a unified theory of cognition. It's been a quest for decades.
There's that quote from 1990 saying, "Such theories are the only way to bring our wonderful, increasing fund of knowledge under intellectual control."
Exactly. It sounds almost overwhelming, doesn't it? Trying to bring all that information into one coherent framework. And it absolutely is an overwhelming challenge. That ideal stands in stark contrast to the reality of most computational models we see today.
Whether in machine learning or cognitive science itself.
Both, yeah. Take something like prospect theory, for example. Hugely influential for decision-making.
Sure. Kahneman and Tversky.
Right. It offers incredibly valuable insights into how people make choices under risk, but it tells us absolutely nothing about how we learn, how we plan, how we explore.
Is that one slice?
Just that one slice. And you might wonder, why has it been so hard to move beyond these specialized models?
Yeah. Why?
Well, partly because building something truly general means accounting for the sheer messiness and diversity of human thought, not just one isolated aspect.
Like the complexity.
Exactly, and that highlights the significant gap Centaur is aiming to address, moving beyond these highly specialized domain-specific models towards something, well, truly general.
So if that's the grand challenge, let's dive into the how of Centaur's creation.
Yeah.
You mentioned it was built on an existing large language model. How did they actually achieve this kind of generalization?
So Centaur was developed in what they call a data-driven manner,
Meaning
its entire architecture and capabilities were shaped by observing and learning directly from actual human behavior, not just theory.
Okay.
The researchers achieved this by fine-tuning a powerful, pre-trained large language model on this massive new collection of human behavioral data.
And this massive new collection is Psych 101, right? Can you give us a sense of its scale? Because massive can mean a lot of things in this field.
It's truly unprecedented, honestly. Psych 101 covers trial-by-trial data from 160 distinct psychological experiments.
160, wow.
Yeah. And this involved more than 60,000 participants.
60,000 people.
Who collectively made over 10,000 choices. 10 million individual decisions.
That's staggering.
It is. And what's fascinating here, I think, is the sheer effort involved in transcribing vastly different experimental paradigms.
Like what kind of tasks?
Oh, multi-armed bandits, complex decision-making tasks, memory recall tests, even supervised learning experiments, all sorts.
And they put all that into a common format.
Into a common natural language format. This unification is key because it allows a single model to interact with this huge diversity of human cognitive tasks.
But that unification step sounds critical, but also incredibly difficult.
Oh, undoubtedly. A massive undertaking.
And the specific language model they use is the backbone. Which one was it?
They leveraged the Llama 3.170B model.
From Meta AI.
Right. The idea was to tap into the vast amounts of knowledge already embedded in these incredibly powerful pre-trained models. You don't start from zero.
Makes sense.
And the crucial fine-tuning process, which adapted Llama specifically to this human behavior data, they used a technique called Q-LoRa.
Cooler. Okay, that sounds like a bit of jargon. Can you break that down for us? How does that work?
Yeah, sure. Think of Q-LoRa as a highly efficient way to train a massive model like Llama 3.1 without actually retraining the entire thing.
Which would be massively expensive.
Exactly. Incredibly costly and time-consuming. Instead, Q-LoRa adds small, low-rank adapters, tiny, specialized modules.
Okay.
These contain only a minuscule fraction of new trainable parameters, like 0.15% of the base model's total parameters, just a tiny fraction.
But most of the model stays the same.
The main huge Llama model remains frozen, untouched.
Okay.
This ingenious approach makes the training process incredibly efficient. For Centaur, it took approximately 5 days on a single A100 80GB GPU.
5 days? That's surprisingly fast for this scale.
It really is. It's like adding a very specific custom attachment to a powerful existing engine rather than rebuilding the whole engine from the ground up.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. How well does Centaur actually predict human behavior then? Did it just memorize the training data, or could it predict the behavior of held-out participants, people it had never seen before?
That's the key test, right? And it did exceptionally well. Centaur consistently outperformed not only the base Llama model,
The one it was built on.
right, but also existing domain-specific cognitive models in almost every single experiment they tested.
Really, even the specialized ones?
Almost all of them. To put some numbers to it, Centaur achieved a negative log likelihood of 0.44.
Okay, and lower is better for that metric, right? Less surprise.
Exactly. Lower means less surprise, better prediction. Centaur's 0.44 was significantly lower than the base Llama's 0.58 and the average domain-specific model's 0.56.
So a clear improvement.
A clear, consistent improvement. It means it was just more on target, predicting human choices with remarkable precision across the board.
So it's remarkably good at predicting what people will do based on what it's learned. But can it actually generate human-like behavior itself? That feels like a tougher test.
It is. That's the open-loop simulation idea.
Can it essentially simulate an entire experiment, feeding its own responses back into itself, just like a human participant would?
That's an excellent point, because open-loop simulations are truly the acid test, as you say. It's not just predicting the next choice based on history.
It's generating the whole sequence.
Right. Generating its own responses and feeding them back, simulating the entire interaction from start to finish, just like a person would. And yes, Centaur showed remarkable human-like simulations across various complex tasks.
You give an example.
Sure. For instance, in the Horizon task, that's a classic experiment for studying exploration versus exploitation strategies.
Okay.
Centaur's performance, a mean score of 50.11, was almost identical to the human participants, who averaged 52.78.
Wow, very close.
Very close. And crucially, it wasn't just the score. It engaged in uncertainty-guided directed exploration, meaning it explored options strategically when it was uncertain, a very human-like pattern that's often missing in other contemporary language models. It showed it wasn't just getting the right answer, but maybe getting it in the human way.
That's fascinating. And what about capturing the diversity of human behavior? Because we don't all act the same. We aren't just an average.
That's another key point, and where Centaur truly shines, I think, in the two-step task.
Which separates different learning strategies.
Exactly. It differentiates between sort of habitual, model-free, and goal-directed model-based learning. Centaur, just like human subjects, produced diverse trajectories.
So not just one strategy.
No, it generated patterns that looked purely model-free, purely model-based, and mixtures thereof. It captured the distribution, the range of human behaviors, not just a single average.
Okay.
And one more in a social prediction game, Centaur accurately predicted human responses, getting it right 64% of the time.
Pretty good.
But notably, it struggled to predict artificial responses, responses generated by an algorithm, only getting those right 35% of the time.
And that matches humans.
Perfectly mirrored human performance in that specific study. Humans are also better at predicting humans than algorithms in that context.
So it's good at predicting humans because it's like humans.
That's the implication. What these results really tell us is that Centaur isn't just mimicking. It seems to be genuinely starting to behave and maybe even process information in ways remarkably similar to humans across a vast array of scenarios.
It's not just prediction, it's pattern matching at a deep level.
Yes, uncovering the patterns that define human decision-making.
Okay, those numbers are undeniably impressive. It really sounds like a step change. But in science, there's always a but, right? Were there any areas where Centaur struggled, or where its performance wasn't quite as stellar compared to humans?
That's a very fair question to ask about any model. And looking through the paper, it actually details very few instances where Centaur significantly underperformed humans across the tested paradigms. Its robustness was quite remarkable.
Really, few caveats.
The main challenges often came when comparing it directly to highly specialized, custom-built cognitive models within their specific narrow domain.
Ah, okay. So the specialist might win on its home turf.
Sometimes, yes. Centaur's strength is its generalization across many domains, whereas those models are absolutely optimized for just one thing. So you might see a dedicated model for, say, reinforcement learning slightly edge out Centaur on that specific task, but Centaur performs well everywhere else too.
Which those specialized models can't do.
Exactly. They are brittle outside their niche. Centaur's power is its breadth.
Okay, that makes sense. So this brings us to generalization. These results are truly mind-blowing. It's one thing to be good on familiar ground, but to predict behavior in entirely new contexts. So stepping back, what does this broader picture really signify for how we understand human cognition?
It signifies that the true test of a foundation model of human cognition, as they call it, is precisely this: its ability to capture behavior in any arbitrary experiment, even if it wasn't part of the training data. That's the acid test for generalization.
Yeah. And Centaur passed.
And Centaur's generalization abilities appear truly robust. Take, for example, modified cover stories.
What does that mean?
Well, in the two-step task within Psych 101, the data always used a spaceship theme or cover story.
Okay.
But when they tested Centaur on a version with a completely different magic carpet cover story, something it had never seen.
Did it get confused?
No, it still captured human behavior accurately. It outperformed both the base llama model and the traditional cognitive model designed for that task. Centaur's negative log likelihood was 0.51 compared to llama's 0.63 and the cognitive model's 0.61.
So it wasn't gypped up by the surface details.
Exactly. It understood the underlying task structure, not just the theme. That's impressive for such a subtle change that often trips up less robust models.
Okay, that's impressive for a subtle change. What about more significant structural modifications, like completely new tasks it's never encountered the structure of before?
It generalized there, too. They tested it on Maggie's Farm, which is a three-armed bandit experiment.
Okay, but the training data only had...
Psych 101 only included 2 armed bandit tasks during training, so a new structure.
And how did it do?
Centaur again performed significantly better, a 0.42 negative log likelihood compared to llama at 0.62. And notably, the traditional cognitive model specifically designed for bandit tasks did not generalize well to this setting at all, scoring 0.98.
Wow, so the specialized model failed when the structure changed slightly.
It broke. But Centaur adapted, and even in entirely new domains, they tested it on a logical reasoning study based on LSAT items.
Like law school questions?
Yeah, that kind of logical reasoning. And that domain was purposefully excluded from Psych 101's training data. Centaur still captured human behavior better than the base llama model. Its score was 1.65 compared to llama's 1.92.
Okay, so even in a totally unrelated cognitive domain.
Yes. And the breadth of these findings is really striking. It wasn't just these 3 examples. The paper shows Centaur also robustly captured human behavior in 6 additional out-of-distribution paradigms.
6 more? Like, what?
Things like moral decision-making, economic games like the ultimatum game, and even naturalistic learning tasks that just kept working across different contexts.
But there was another fascinating, truly unexpected finding you mentioned earlier. Alignment to human neural activity. How does a model trained only on behavior end up aligning with our brains? That sounds almost spooky.
It is mind-bending. I mean, think about it. You train a model only on how people act their choices, their response times, and somehow its internal workings spontaneously start to mirror the patterns of activity seen in our brains.
How do they even measure that?
Through fMRI analyses, they compared the internal representations, the activation patterns inside Centaur, with fMRI measurements from human brains performing the two-step task.
And Centaur's patterns matched better.
Consistently outperformed the base llama's representations in predicting the fMRI signals.
Wow.
And it wasn't just that task, it also maintained intact neural alignment in a completely unrelated sentence reading task, where traditional cognitive models showed a substantial drop in performance.
So the behavioral training somehow induced brain-like representations.
It suggests that behavior alone carries profound clues about the very architecture of our minds, maybe more than we realized. It's a truly unexpected insight into how our brains might organize information. Maybe structure follows function, even in AI.
That's a really deep point. So it didn't just learn what people chose, but also how quickly. You mentioned response times earlier.
Yes, exactly. That adds another layer of complexity, doesn't it?
It really does. Speed matters.
And it also proved superior in predicting human response times, capturing a much larger proportion of the variation in how quickly people responded compared to the other models.
How much better?
Well, using a metric called conditional R-squared, Centaur explained about 87% of the variance in response times.
Okay, 87%.
Compared to around 75% for the base llama and 77% for the specialized cognitive models.
So a noticeable jump in explaining the when as well as the what.
Precisely. So it's not just what we choose, but how quickly we choose that Centaur is getting right.
This is all incredible for prediction and understanding. But how can Psych 101 and Centaur actually be used as tools for scientific discovery itself? This is where it moves beyond just observation and prediction, right, into generating new science.
Precisely. And they've demonstrated a really compelling case study showing just that, focusing on a multi-attribute decision-making experiment.
Okay, how did that work?
So, step one, they used another AI, DeepSeek R1, which is a language model good at reasoning, to analyze the Psych 101 data from this experiment.
Okay, AI analyzing AI's data set.
Kind of. DeepSeek R1 looked at the human choices and generated explanations for the behavior. And what it proposed was a novel, two-step decision-making strategy.
Something researchers hadn't considered before.
A specific combination of heuristics that wasn't one of the standard models for that task. So the AI didn't just find a pattern, it actually generated a new, testable hypothesis about human decision-making.
That's astonishing in itself.
Yeah.
Is this truly a breakthrough in how we do science, not just what we discover? Using AI to suggest the theories.
It really feels like it could be. And then, step two, they took this verbal strategy from the AI.
The two-step idea.
Right, and they formalized it into a computational model. And guess what? This new AI-suggested model explained human response behavior more accurately than the three main strategies considered in the original study.
Better than the existing human theories.
Correct. But here's the twist. Even this improved model still fell short of Centaur's overall goodness of fit. Centaur was still better at predicting the raw behavior.
Okay, so Centaur is like the gold standard predictor.
Exactly. So here's a clever next step, step three. They used a method called scientific regret minimization. Essentially, they used Centaur as a black box predictive model, a reference point.
A benchmark.
A benchmark. They used it to identify specific instances, specific trials, where the DeepSeek R1 model, the AI-generated theory, failed to match Centaur's accuracy. Where did the theory go wrong compared to the best predictor?
And what did inspecting those specific failures reveal? Was there a moment of, aha, that's what's going on?
That's exactly it, a breakthrough moment. Inspecting these failures revealed that the switch between the two heuristics in the AI model is probably not as strict as initially thought.
So people aren't rigidly flipping between strategies.
Exactly. They realized that human decision makers don't rigidly jump from one strategy to another based on some threshold. Instead, it's more of a blend, a softer transition.
More fluid.
More fluid. This insight led to step four, a refined model that used a weighted average of both heuristics rather than a hard switch. And this final model...
Did it match Centaur?
It matched Centaur's predictive power while still remaining interpretable, unlike the black box Centaur itself.
Wow, so Centaur acted as a high-fidelity reference point to guide the human scientists, prompted by another AI, to a more accurate and understandable theory.
Precisely. It shows how these tools can serve as a blueprint for model-guided scientific discovery.
So, if this blueprint is followed, it truly feels like it could fundamentally reshape how we approach cognitive science. Maybe enabling insights even in small data sets, perhaps pushing us towards automated cognitive science. Am I overstating its potential impact here?
Honestly, I don't think so at all. It really opens up some exciting new avenues for future exploration.
Such as?
Well, one obvious area is probing Centaur's internal representations much more deeply, trying to understand how it represents knowledge and processes information.
To get clues about humans.
Exactly. This could generate new, testable hypotheses about human cognition itself. How does it structure information about risk, or memory, or exploration? Another really interesting avenue is using Psych 101, the dataset itself,
Okay.
to train entirely new models with different fundamental architectures from scratch, not just fine-tuning llama.
Why do that?
Well, it would allow researchers to investigate the neural architecture of human cognition more directly, asking questions like, is human processing better described by attention-based architectures like transformers, or maybe architectures with more explicit vector-based memory systems?
So using the data to test basic assumptions about brain architecture.
Right, rather than just assuming an existing model structure like llama is the best analogy.
Fascinating.
And finally, Psych 101 itself is an ongoing project. It's not finished.
They're adding more.
Yes. While currently focused heavily on learning and decision-making, the plan is to expand it significantly.
Right.
Include more domains like psycholinguistics, language processing,
Okay.
social psychology, interpersonal interactions, and crucially, individual differences.
Like age, personality.
Exactly. How do these factors change behavior across tasks? And this leads to an important point about data diversity. They also aim to move beyond the current weird bias.
Weird. Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic.
You got it. Why is tackling this crucial? Because so much of our current psychological understanding, our models, are built almost entirely on studies of these specific demographics.
Which isn't representative of humanity.
Not even close. To truly build a foundation model of human cognition, we absolutely need to capture the vast diversity of human experience globally, not just a relatively small, privileged sliver of it.
That's a huge but vital undertaking.
Absolutely essential if the goal is truly general understanding.
So, to try and wrap up this incredible journey, Centaur is emerging as a potential foundation model of human cognition, leveraging the power of large language models and this massive human behavioral dataset, Psych 101. It's not just predicting choices, it's demonstrating robust generalization to new tasks and contexts, and even showing this surprising alignment with human neural activity. It's quite something.
That's right. The researchers use this analogy of applying Centaur to the equivalent of 16 cognitive
A
decathlons.
decathlon, like a series of diverse tests.
Exactly. A rigorous framework where models are tested across a wide battery of diverse experiments. And in these competitions, Centaur consistently outperformed numerous established, specialized models across the board.
It won the decathlons.
Pretty much. This outcome really indicates that this data-driven discovery of domain-general models of cognition is not just a promising research direction anymore. It's a deeply impactful one that's yielding results now.
Which leads to a final, maybe provocative thought for you listening. If a model like Centaur can predict and simulate human behavior so accurately across such a vast array of tasks, what does that truly reveal about the fundamental mechanisms ticking away inside our own minds?
Yeah, what are the core computational principles it might be capturing?
And how might this growing ability to understand and even prototype aspects of human cognition reshape our future? Could it help us tackle those grand challenges from disease to societal problems that really define what it means to be human?
Big question.
Definitely something to think about. We invite you to continue your own deep dive into the really fascinating implications of this work.